All right. Hi, everybody. How are you doing?
Hello.
Hello, doing great. How are you?
Doing good. I thought we could do our introductions. So, with our name, organization title, and then also we're going to have a little check-in question to get ourselves ready for today. So, the check-in question is going to be, how has education you received changed your life? Who would like to go first?
I nominate Jason.
All right, Jason.
Oh, super. Thanks, Tammy. Hi, I'm Jason Elliott. I'm the Assistant Director for Sustainability at Duke University. How has education changed me? So in undergrad, I went in studying accounting. And I was just like, I really like the rigor and I like, numbers and all of those things. But then over time, I slowly started realizing that it wasn't going to meet that core need to think about the triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line. And so I went into an economics course that talked about the environment. It's like, great, okay, something that works. And so I added economics while I was an undergrad, and then that led me to where I am today. And so it's a very exciting pathway.
Nice. Thanks, Jason. Tavy, do you want to go next?
Tavy, you're next.
Hey, I'm Tavy Capps. I'm the Sustainability Director at Duke University. And I think my early education, shaped where I am today. I went to elementary school every other year in the Virgin Islands in a little teeny town in Maine. So I think seeing the difference, total difference of those two different education systems and cultures and teachers and diversity, I think, and experiencing, being a minority in the Virgin Islands and Maine being totally non-diverse and very small town, I think opened my eyes at a younger age to some of the concepts that we're struggling with today. So I think I appreciate that I had that in, first grade and second grade, because I think it helps me be more open to thinking differently and thinking about other people's opinions in the future.
I'll go next or last. Here we are. So my name's Dallas Scott, and I am the founder and principal of Trust. And education, I was thinking about this question, and I have this memory of being super engaged with education up until 6th or 7th grade. And then there's this cloudy mist that covers what I ever learned in 8th grade through the rest of high school. And I sort of lost all confidence in education and academia. And so college for me was a really big leap, and wondering if I belonged there. And I felt like I was in 4th and 5th grade again once I got to college. I rediscovered learning. I rediscovered a lot, and I rediscovered my passion both for psychology and sort of understanding behaviors, and then linking, similar to Jason, I recognized this the first time I heard about climate change and sustainability, and I pitched my course to that, and I've been there in this field ever since. So it's been incredibly important for the rest of my career. And I have a dog. Do you guys hear the dog in the background? Awesome. Here we are. But that's all right. That's part of the world we're living in right now. So I'm going to pass it on to Tavy for additional context for today's session.
Great. So as the director of Sustainable Duke, I've been there for 15 years, and our office has really evolved and grown. It started as an office of one even before me, a year before I came to Duke, and it's grown to an office of 9 people. Started initially very focused on operations. We're under our executive vice president at the university, so there was some student focus, but very operational focus around sustainability and where the university wanted to be. Over time, we've really expanded that more to the academic side of campus, thinking about how we can push ourselves to go even further and how that operational part of Duke can be a teaching tool for students as well. Our office itself has also evolved and grown sort of organically in a lot of ways. The Duke Campus Farm and the Duke Carbon Offsets Initiative over the past decade have become part of Sustainable Duke. But in some ways, I think before we started on this journey of thinking about a strategic plan, we're 3 different departments within Sustainable Duke that worked together but didn't always feel like we had a cohesive vision or overarching goals that we all felt tied to. So to try to find that vision and bring the group together and have more cohesion, we hired Dallas to help us develop the strategic plan, but also think about our workplace culture and how we could move from a group of people that like each other but didn't always necessarily work together on a day-to-day basis. Even our offices weren't in the same physical space before we were all remote. But to really cultivate a office culture and think about how we could come up with a strategic plan that felt real and tangible and people felt bought into as a group, as opposed to our sort of 3 parts within the office. So that's where we started. Dallas, do you want to talk a little bit more about what we want to focus on today in that process? You're muted.
Yes, absolutely. And I just realized that it might actually be helpful for people to be reminded of the title of our presentation for today, which is Developing a Culture of Trust, Feedback, and Growth in the Workplace. So what we wanted to do today is have a conversation, because so much of what we're going to be talking about today has to do with these relationships we've built and sort of questions we have about ourselves personally. So what we're going to do is do a little bit of storytelling, a little reflection on our own personal growth and how that has supported our interactions with colleagues and others. We also have a PowerPoint that sort of gives examples of some of these tools that we're going to be talking about. So that's sort of going to be the general cadence of our presentation today. And so I'll pass it on to Tavy, because I think Tavy has a really good starter story to think about when it comes to developing a culture of trust, feedback, and growth. Go ahead, Tavy.
Great. One of the exercises that we did a strategic mini retreat, just so people are aware of the process. It was a 2-day intense but fun session with our full team and Dallas. The first day was more around this culture piece and facilitation, and then the second day was more around our strategic plan. And I think some of the exercises we did on that first day were really helpful to create a foundation of trust and sort of coming from the same place. And one of those is the crown exercise that I'm going to let Dallas explain a little bit the structure of it, and then share with you how I think that really helped set a good tone for our overall work that day.
Yeah, I'll share my screen now just so people can get a sense for it. So one of the tools that I like to do is to allow ourselves to try to answer this question here of what does it mean to bring your full self to work? Because I think we hear it and we're like, yes, we should, but probably not that piece, or probably not that piece either, right? And so this is an exercise that helps us think about, what it means to have psychological safety at work. And the definition here is when the team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other and with each other. And I think this crown exercise allows people to dip their toes to their comfort level into vulnerability by creating sort of an activity that's structured to get people to think about what we literally have like floating around in our heads when we're interacting on like the task at hand at work. So the exercise, basically there's a few steps. It was very maybe elementary school. Everyone got some color cut out circles, and I asked everyone to write their top 2 responses for the following themes. So your biggest strengths, your biggest fears, your core values, and all of those were on different colors. And I didn't give anyone any sort of context beyond that. But I did say it would be shared, and so reminded everyone to put on their circles but they would feel comfortable sharing with the rest of the group. So they had to kind of balance that piece a little bit. The next part was to get a glue stick, again, elementary school activity and fun, to get a glue stick and put it all on this piece of paper, and then people had to put it on their heads. And I will demonstrate because I actually have my crown from—
Ours are hostage in our office.
I brought mine home with me. But everyone got to put a crown on their head, and that's the whoop when I mention that. But what it does, it very helps us visually see the things that we have floating over our heads that we often don't talk about. So the next and the last one was to have a conversation about it. People got to share one or two things that they wanted to verbally share. But the rest were just sort of up there. And then we had lunch with the crowns on our head. And we got to ask questions and get curious and learn more about each other. And so I'll pass it back to you, Tavy, and I'll stop sharing so you can share more about how this experience, what you learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think this was one that I'm glad we did early in that process. I think, as I mentioned, we don't all physically sit in the same office space. We have team members that, may not work on projects together, may not interact with each other beyond our full staff meetings once a month. So I think I felt like I was connected to the full team, but realizing that there wasn't necessarily that same relationship or even opportunity to build a relationship among our team members. So I think this exercise really helped humanize everybody, helped everybody feel like they were sharing with each other and being vulnerable, like Dallas mentioned, in a safe space. And I think the thing I took away most from it was we all, have this baggage or things that we bring to work that we might think someone else has it totally figured out because they're really good at not showing those things. I think we all have, one piece of it that we noticed as a common theme was that everybody in some shape or form had self-doubt or, feeling like they weren't knowledgeable enough about something. And I think for everybody to see that as a group really helped, make us feel like we were in this together, and it wasn't that you're the one person who has this doubt about something, that we all felt that. And I think sometimes we don't share those things that we feel like we need to leave at home, but our body language or our mood comes with us, and it can be misconstrued. It can be taken as someone's upset with somebody at work when there's nothing that has to do with work. It's, I've been arguing with my 10-year-old all morning, frustrated. So, and we do, I think we share that to a point, but when you don't have those inter-office interactions, or you feel like you're not supposed to talk about those more personal issues, it makes it hard to have that culture. And I think this exercise, put everybody on the same page and let everybody see each other's fears or small things that they do to reset themselves at home. And I think really helped us get to know each other in a way that we didn't necessarily have before.
Thanks, Tavy. Yeah, Jason, did you have any additions in your experience with it? Because I know feedback was like, "Ooh, that was harder than I thought it was going to be." Like, I don't know how comfortable I was with being that vulnerable, but it has seemed to age well. Like, it was a little, maybe it's strong at first, but the experience seems to have aged well.
The only thing from the crown exercise is now I just need to keep in mind, like, every person that you're, like, no one's going to wear a physical crown that shows their things that are going on, and your crown is constantly changing day by day. What is my strength today? I'm like mentally focused, and other days I'm like, I'm mentally frazzled. And so it's such an interesting thing that, like, when you go and speak with people, and like at Duke, within our office, it's 9 people, but we work with like 100 other people on any given day, and some of like keep going out in these broader circles that it's so tricky to keep in mind that everybody has these, and their reaction to how you're interacting with them may just, like Tavia was saying, may not have any indication about you as a person, but some other thing that's going on that you just don't know about. So I found it to be just such a fascinating thing that leads to like, it's now a great time to talk about giving feedback, because that's something that when Tavia and I were talking with Dallas about things that we found to be useful or would be useful for our retreat, we are really good about giving positive reinforcement feedback. And we tend to shy away from the like constructive or sometimes it's the generally difficult conversations. And you might pocket them all away into your little annual review, which then just feels like a deluge of like, why didn't you tell me all this before? We could have been working better this entire time. And it just leads to this like, it's such a frustrating thing that we're trying to figure out, how do we break that apart in our office? And so I think Dallas has some resources, some slides to share on this topic, and then I'll tell some stories about my experiences with feedback.
Yeah, thanks. I'll share my screen now, and I appreciate the story that Jason's going to tell, but you'll see how it's linked here. In that, one of the things that we undervalue or are not taught, especially in our college degrees, is sort of like the emotional labor of working with other people. Like, there's a lot there, and so we think it's like sort of the mental labor of what we're doing, but there's a lot in the heart and in the head of how am I holding on to like conflict and how I interact with people. So I think people are, when they think about investing in a career, they think about putting in lots of hours and they think about doing all those things. But what if you shifted that mindset of how to be more honest and direct and provide feedback to your colleagues? So not only they get to learn and grow, but you get to learn and grow from them as well. Like how would that allow for a faster pace of growth in your career and collectively in this field? How would that take shape? So one of the things that we talked about in when it came to feedback was feedback triggers, which comes from Thanks for the Feedback, a book that I often recommend people read by Stone and Keene. But they talk about, you can't control how people give you feedback. So you really have to pause and think about how you learn to receive feedback. And in recognizing that when people give you feedback, even if you're not 100% sure how you feel about it, to be aware that there are triggers going on in your head and understanding what those are. So there's the truth trigger, which is, this seems wrong or off target. Like, I feel like I'm actually doing this well, and I'm wondering if this person doesn't have all the information. There is the relationship trigger, being like, that was absolutely great feedback, I just can't hear it from you. Which I think sometimes is like totally on point. People are like, oh yeah, I've been there. Like, I know who that person is, who I have a hard time getting feedback from them. And it could be because like they're always late. So if they have to tell you that you're late, it like doesn't resonate with you, even if it was true. And then the last one is an identity trigger, which is like, it was true, but it's absolutely opposite to how you see yourself or how you want others to see you. And to me, that one's really difficult. And it usually causes an identity quake in my life, where it takes a couple of days for me to be like, what am I going to do with this? Because that one stung a bit. So these are tools that I've used in sort of a name it to tame it, toolbox, that when I'm finding myself confronted with feedback, I think through these first and understand why I'm experiencing feedback in a certain way. I'll pass it back to you, Jason, to tell your story.
And so within our office, it has been like it's a journey that we are still all walking along, because it's not just a flipping a switch. It's not like after the retreat, we're like, we got it, we're fixed. Because it takes a lot of practice to get used to this new socialization of giving information. But I think it has led to a stronger foundation of trust within our office, which has been really great. Where we can say like, oh, you don't seem like you're, quite yourself today. What's going on? The meeting seemed a little frazzled. And it's just a very useful, like, yes, this is things that I'm dealing with. And I'm like, great, that's useful information. Let us know how we can be supportive. And so I think that has worked really well internally within the Sustainable Duke office or family. However, after the summit, I read the Radical Candor by Kim Scott book based on your recommendation. And in some ways, I was just like, yes, I am now ready about feedback. I'm going to try it out in the wild, meaning outside of our office, but still within people who we regularly interact with. But I was at just a luncheon with a mix of students, staff, and faculty. And some of the students were mentioning like, oh, I'm thinking about applying to this program. And I'm just like, great, yes, you're paying for your time here. Follow your bliss and find the things that bring you joy. One of the faculty members pushed back and said, I feel personally like upset and kind of offended that you wouldn't choose my program. And it's one of those things that I completely get it. And so that might be one of their triggers, something that like, I worked really hard to build this. Why don't you see the value? And so that's the thing that I later reflected on. But the conversation kept going. And I was just, at the end of it, I was just like, wow, this was really uncomfortable for me. The students seemed uncomfortable. And so I was just like, I'm going to practice thoughtful and caring but direct feedback. So I reached out to this person and I hemmed and hawed over this email probably more than I've hemmed and hawed over anything, because I was just like, oh, this is going to be the thing that makes it or breaks it. And I got a response back to them, or back from them, that was just kind of like, you don't know me or anything that I'm about. This is not helpful. And I was just like, ooh, that didn't work well. And that was okay. But it really just kind of like shattered my like, ooh, radical candor doesn't work in all places. And so I had to go back to thinking like, well, what was missing? And I think some of it is the trust was definitely missing. We had a semblance of a relationship, but not a super strong one. But I think I really poked at some of those identity and truth triggers that I did not perceive. I didn't see their crown, and that was something that I should have thought about prior to writing my feedback. But it is one of those things that I'm hoping, regardless of how they reacted in the moment, that there is probably still some internalization of what was said, and it might just like open the window just a little bit. And I'm hoping that that will then potentially interact in their mind and future interactions with students. So I have generally high hopes that it worked out.
Yeah, Jason, I love that story, especially because I saw you right after at last year's ASHE event, and you were like, yeah, let's, like, what happened? And,
Told me to try this.
yeah, like I tried this, and like what happened? But I think we've talked about this. It's just like with feedback, your intent behind it was so sincere, and we can never, even if you've spent all the time in the world crafting it and trying to think about their perspective and thinking about this, like you can't control their response to feedback, just as you can't control how feedback's given to you. And why I recommend lots of people take trainings on how to give and receive feedback, but like it is just part of the interaction. And so I saw it as such a gift that you were willing to put yourself out there, not knowing how it would be received, but you were thinking about like their future interactions with students and how much you cared about that person's like career. That's how I saw it. And I think I've had lots of feedback where I was like, maybe that will age well, right? Tavy, did you have any additions to that?
Yeah, I think just being honest that it is a journey, that we're working on this as an office, but like Jason said, it wasn't like a switch was flipped and it's easy now. And I think we've really tried to encourage each other to have some of those more difficult conversations, or think about how we can give feedback that's constructive but also direct in times that are, when something's happening, instead of waiting to talk about that issue, or even feeling resentful about something that someone isn't doing, but trying to push ourselves and push each other to have those conversations sooner rather than later, and just recognizing that it continues to be a challenge and something that we deal with day to day.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a nice tie-in to some of our next talking points here about embracing conflict. And Tavy, I love you shared about and I absolutely feel it, and others in sort of roles of managing staff feel it, of wanting to have, like, being fair in how you run your office, but also recognizing at a certain point, like, decisions are going to be made, which if someone disagrees will be an area of conflict. And so if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then I can share a couple of slides and then tell a story that I have in that scenario.
Yeah, and I think this goes along with to sort of a journey theme of getting to know the people that you work with and not being afraid to have very direct conversations. And I think our sustainability world often, in a good way, wants to hear all opinions and come to consensus, and, you know, in our office or in other sustainability offices, be more democratic than, you know, I'm the boss, what I say goes, you guys go do it. And I think I have definitely tried to practice that in a lot of ways, but sometimes doing that too much has created more conflict or issues within our office, when I really needed to be direct and say, this is a decision that I value everybody's opinion, but ultimately I have to make the decision. And I've tried to practice that since our retreat in a couple different ways, and I definitely don't love conflict and recognize that in myself, but I've been pleasantly surprised when I've been very honest and direct and sort of set the stage of, you know, a budget conversation where we had to make some cuts, and I wanted our manager's opinions, but ultimately I was going to make the final decision, and it may not be exactly what they had written down. Everybody was fine with it. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't, I was assuming that more directness would cause more conflict. And in some ways, I think it was the opposite, that people appreciated knowing how the decision was going to be made, even though they didn't get to ultimately make that final decision.
Right. Yeah, this makes me think of came from the Radical Candor, that clear is kind, right? And I think sometimes when we're giving maybe things that might be a conflict or a challenging discussion, we sort of like walk around the edge of it and then like kind of hint at it, but we don't actually get there, which can create a lot of confusion for people. It kind of, the mental image that's coming to my mind is like the dog that never quite lays down. Just trying to find the right spot. And you're like, just lie down already. Like, tell me what it is. And I know I got fantastic feedback from a staff member that's like, Dallas, like, I know it's coming, and you starting your like walk around just makes me nervous. I really wish you just, in sort of like that dog analogy, just like plop down and tell me what it is that I need to hear. And I'm so thankful for that. So here's a couple of slides and tools that have helped me in that space too, because we're definitely not alone in the like shying away from conflict. And so I'm looking here and share. Here we go. So how do we learn to embrace conflict, right? And I like this idea that if we feel uncertain, this one really resonated me. If we feel uncertain or missing trust, we get consumed by it. So it lowers the function of a team. So trying to be 100% democratic when you know at the end of the day someone needs to make a decision, there can be like, you lose some trust tokens there, because it sounds like it's all going to be this, like everyone's choice is going to be equally weighed, when that's actually not true. It also can get fuzzy, like who's actually responsible here? Like how are we going to be like making decisions in this office? And so I think the piece here, and you know, Jason hinted at it, and Tavy, you've mentioned this, is like honoring the relationship that you have with your staff or other people and putting that first, and giving feedback. Like, I think those need to go hand in hand. So sometimes people think like that super blunt, you know, take it or leave it, here's my feedback. That's not the direction we're talking about, but it's recognizing that like I've thought a lot about this. I think this might how it might impact you. And also, I'm going forward with this decision, and here's my rationale. So the other visual that has helped me is from the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I think this just illustrates that, again, you know, we're all not alone in sort of this challenge of conflict. And one of the things I like about this is recognizing sort of what takes place if we don't establish trust. And I used to try to jump right into feedback, into the same realization Jason had of like, oh, you don't trust me. You're not going to take my feedback if you don't trust me, right? So if you don't have trust, you have a lot of invulnerability with your team, which is one of the reasons why we started our conversation with that crown exercise, to sort of dip our toe into being vulnerable together. And if you're not willing to have conflict, then you have this artificial harmony. You might have the team that gives a lot of high fives and a lot of positive reinforcement, but it doesn't actually mean that you're gelling as well as you should. And when you have that ambiguity, there might be a lack of commitment because you're not 100% sure the direction of the organization. There's a lot of ambiguity of what the values or the direction should be. You also, if you don't have afraid of conflict, you might not call people out when their work isn't to a specific standard. And so all of a sudden your standards get lowered and people on the team are like, I want to work for a high standard organization. And then this attention to results, because all of these things sort of like trickle down. And then people get more concerned about their own personal status and ego instead of thinking about the collective of the team. So there is a ripple effect, right? We think conflict as a negative, but I think how do we flip that on its head and realize this actually is going to strengthen me and my organization by being more direct and clear and kind, honoring that relationship first, honoring because you're going to lose trust if you don't honor that relationship. The thing is you might be like, Dallas, that sounds great. But how do you even address conflict? How do you even get into that space? And this is where I'm really thankful. I like tried lots of different tools in my head, but this one really stuck with me. This came from, this is a Brene Brown quote from one of her books, but she talks about having shitty first drafts. And this is where I tell sort of my historical fiction of an interaction I had. So I might have had like an email exchange with Jason or something, and I'll be like, Jason, can I share with you my shitty first draft about our interaction last week? Like, I feel that, you know, I cut you off in a meeting and your face seemed to change, and now I think that you find me to be like rude and obnoxious and that you don't want to talk to me, and then today we also seemed off, like, can you help me edit this? So I like let him know that this is absolutely only my perception, and I'm looking at behaviors of his and not saying what he was feeling, but I like say these things, and then Jason can like edit it. And Jason, you might say, Dallas, yes, that was kind of rude. And I still like you. And it actually wasn't, I got over it within like a half a second. So you've been carrying this weight on for a week now for just as a worry stone in your head. So I find being able to have this shared vocabulary, and I've used this with teams I've worked with in the past. I've used this with clients I work with, trying to be like, this is how I'm feeling that you might be seeing me right now. Can you help me edit this? Just allows us to start the conversation and have that back and forth. So I'm looking to Tavy and Jason to see if you guys have anything else you want to add on conflict, on how to even get the conversation started. And also the other piece is like having a shared vocabulary, because one of the things, as Jason and Tavy said, like the couple-hour training that you guys received wasn't going to be the like, we did it, right? But it is hopefully a toolkit where you have shared vocabulary, shared experiences, and things like that that you can bring with you once you're confronted with a potential challenging situation. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if you guys want to add to this.
Yeah. I think one thing that you have said to us, Alice, resonated with me in this context was, it's not like we had a toxic working relationship with our team. You know, I'd say we all consider each other friends. Some know each other better than others, just probably based mostly on like proximity of seeing each other. But we still struggled with this. So I think for other people watching this presentation or thinking about this, just because your team feels like it's functioning relatively well doesn't mean there aren't ways to improve that, and think about, you know, how could you get even better at something that has started. I think sometimes there may be a resistance to doing a training like this or having conversations like this because like things are mostly good. You know, is this going to shake it up? Again, a sort of fear of stirring the pot and exposing conflict. But I think for us, it's been really helpful, and I think it's made the team stronger. I think it's made the interactions sort of peer-to-peer stronger, for people to get to know each other better and feel more comfortable. So I would encourage others to think about, you're not trying to fix a problem, you're just trying to make your team better, and that we could all benefit from these types of trainings or conversations. Jason, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and so one of the things that Dallas, you said during our session that I just keep coming back to, because it's just such a small, single minute interaction that happens, I think, once a day, that somebody shows up late to a meeting and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. And you said what people normally do. I'm Midwestern. Some people are from the South. We just like, oh, that's fine, no worries. But instead you said, like, you should actually say something like, thank you for our apology, we're already started. And that way it's like, no, I see you and I know that, versus me just like, now I have these like interactions that are more in that vein versus the other previous ones that are just like fester. It's like, oh, they're always late, they don't care about me. And that may not be the case. But I think it's those like tiny little interactions that can build up to some of these larger ones, which I find to be like a fascinating mini experiment, because I actually haven't gotten anybody to be like off-put by just saying, thank you for your apology, which is a very rational thing to say versus the kind of like, no, don't worry about it, not a big deal. And then you're in the background just like, oh, I'm mad. So it's very fascinating to try those things out in the wild.
Yeah, and I think to me, those are the trust tokens you develop, right? Like, you don't have to worry about me collecting resentment for you because I've never actually told you it bothers me that you're late for my meetings, right? Like, and I think those are the things that I think we can see in others, but it's hard to kind of like see it back in ourselves. And I think about like how other ways we develop trust and sort of set expectations. And, you know, when I've hired people in the past, I have expectations, like we have a no gossip rule. And I'm very clear of what gossip means is when your intent is to kind of allow yourself to rise to the top and be right. And just saying like, we are allowed to have conflict in this office and we're allowed to find constructive ways to work through it. But we're not here just to like throw stones and be like harumph about it. And when I'm in situations with people and I see it going into the gossip world, I'll say, ooh, can I pause here? Because this, to me, we're getting in territory that I'm feeling is not as constructive and heading into the gossip zone, which like is kind of in my own way makes me feel better about it because I don't want to engage with it. But I think about if I ever see, what I want is for people to know if I'm ever in a conversation with just like Tavy and I, and Jason walks by, he's not going to be sitting there being like, what are they saying about me, right? Because we know that those parameters have been set. And I think setting expectations, not fearing conflict, being direct, and then honoring those relationships can be really key to doing the work. And I think Tavy said it, Jason said it, like it is a balancing act and it's never going to feel super easy. You're gonna have days where you feel like I got this, but then the next day you're gonna be like, it's hard again. How did that happen? And I think it's just sort of embracing that. But if you're feeling like you're on a balancing beam, you're doing it right, because you're not following all the way into the like, oh, it's okay, nor are you following into being like a bully. but you're just like finding your space of being assertive and kind, and like creating that space for that trust to grow. So I think we're almost out of time here, but I do want to maybe check in about maybe a wrap-up question, and thinking about where do you want to go with this work, both in your office or in your personal life, if you want to go there. And I can start that I am learning these tools for my life, like outside of work. And I've realized, like, both with my partner and with my two daughters, like what it means to empathize and set expectations and be honest. And also give myself sort of this like self-compassion piece, and using these tools in my own framework is where I'm like wanting to continue to invest. And so that's sort of like where I'm going forward with this. Tavy or Jason, do you want to share your final thoughts?
So one thing that it's really tricky giving feedback in a direct and timely manner in a virtual world. The moment you click goodbye or end session, it's like, oh, I don't see you anymore. And then you have to set up that other meeting. And so there's a lot of interesting intention. But the thing that we need to wrestle with and accept is like, we're not probably going back to physical office spaces for the foreseeable future, potentially not even until the end of the school year or beyond. And so that's something that I've been trying to like catch like Tavy to say like, ooh, can you stay on for 5 more minutes on this Zoom line? Or Becky, let's chat real quick. And so it's been really useful, but you have to like add that intention that just everything has to be much more cerebral. You have to be like, oh, I need to make this, because you're not walking back from the meeting room anymore. You're not getting a coffee after the meeting. And so it's such a interesting experience that I think we need to work on, but like I've found some successes in it that have worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Tavy.
Yeah, and I think somewhat similar to you, Dallas. I've been thinking about this for work, but also thinking about how I practice it at home. I have a 10-year-old who's doing virtual 5th grade, and we have struggled is the kind way I'd say, for me to give her feedback, or for me to even help her, and her not automatically, get defensive. And I could find myself practicing some of the tools. Like I asked my 10-year-old, like, what could I do to like help you hear what I'm saying in a positive way? Like, is there something I could do differently that you could hear my thoughts or help in a positive way? And she was like, you could say something that I'm doing good first. And I was like, I can do that. Like I can totally say, and my tendency, and I've seen this in myself, is to like go straight for the like, you need to do this and this and this. I do it with students, like papers with the class that I co-teach. Like I have to force myself to say like, this is really good, or this part I thought you wrote really well, but and I was hearing this from my daughter, that like, before you jump to tell me all the things I need to correct, tell me something I did well so I can hear the criticism in a different way.
Honor the relationship piece, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's helped so much, and I think, how do I practice that in work situations or other personal situations, to try to be honest with myself that my tendency, like I sort of assume people know that I think 90% of it is good, so I just give the 10% like what you could improve. And I think if we're trying to switch that mindset a little bit, or just be more deliberate about talking about the positives, even when we want to bring up the conflict or the negative, is something that I'm trying to be better at, and I'm glad my 10-year-old was teaching me that.
And I've read that people's getting praise, descriptive praise specifically, so you specifically say what they like about your work, is more valuable to staff than praises, than like other pieces, just to feel like they can see the value that they're bringing to a team. So I think my last piece is just I'm going to share this screen one more time, just so if people do want to reach out, that we have our contact information here. It's also in the deck that is going to be uploaded. And then I think one thing that we can model together to close is, Jason mentioned on Zoom calls, it's really easy to forget about the feedback because you like walk away, like everything just vanishes. But one thing people can have in their meetings, and just spend a minute, is asking for feedback in your meetings. So we can say, what are our strengths from today and what are improvables? So maybe we can model that right now, a strength and an improvable from today. And I'm happy to start. I think the strength was, I love the stories and I love working with you both. An improvable is, I have no idea which dog in my neighborhood is barking. I hope it wasn't too distracting for people. But that, can't control that one. Tavy or Jason, do you have a strength or improvable from today?
I'm thinking.
Improvable, but throwing me right into this without warning.
So I think the strength, like, I'm like cut, print, Emmy. I think this thing worked really, really well. I get very nervous about video recorded, but I think we all did super great. Improvable, like my internet just cut out. And so if I missed anything, I'm sorry. I'm now back.
You missed our slide that tells everyone that they can get in contact with us, Jason. And Tavy, do you have anything?
I think strength.
Check mark if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think strength was just being honest about, you know, that I think sometimes with presentations, especially, you know, sometimes at ASHE and other conferences, people want to be like, look at all the wonderful things that I'm doing and I have it all figured out. And I think the more useful and the more authentic ones are like what didn't work or what people have learned. So I hope this is helpful to people in that way. I think improvables, you know, just having the opportunity to talk to people who might watch this and answer questions. I mean, all these improvables in some ways we can't help. You know, you can't help a dog was barking when we're recording a session.
Or could I? Biscuits or something.
You know, I think being able to hear people's questions or own issues they're dealing with in these types of conversations is really one of the things that's most beneficial. So I think it'd be nice to be able to have a broader conversation.
We might, we'll see the interest and see if anyone reaches out, but we could host a coffee hour or something and give some space for that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful to both of you for this participation. It was fun. And I think that's it, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.